everybody, to the Hot Tag Hooligans Wrestling Podcast Show with myself, Aaron, and Tom. And tonight, if you're a fan of independent wrestling and you're a fan of wrestling in general, and you don't know who our guest is, man, oh man, do you need to do some research. It's the one and only Alex Zayne. How's it going?
It is going amazing. Thank you for that warm introduction. Yeah, if you don't know who I am, then get on the old internet machine and type in Alex Zayne or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, if you were to put your name in today, one thing that would definitely come up immediately was your surprise return to Ring of Honor, where you won the Honor Rumble this past week. And now you get a title shot soon, perhaps against Bandito, perhaps against whoever. Tell us a bit of how that came to fruition.
Well, actually, Ring of Honor reached out to me shortly after my release, very thankfully, because I worked with them a little bit. I only actually completed 2 shows with them before I was signed, and the third show that I was doing with them, the name's escaping me right now, but we were in Vegas, and it was the day the pandemic was announced, and that show got pretty much wiped, so I didn't get to do that show. And then a few months later, through the pandemic, is when I started talking with WWE and working on the paperwork there. And so, yeah, we pretty much just picked up right where we left off. It kind of felt like my debut. Like I said, I completed 2 shows for Ring of Honor before I signed with WWE and before the pandemic. And in my debut, I defeated their now world champion, Bandito. So yeah, it felt like good timing, right? It felt cool. So yeah, they just hit me up, and we had that date locked down pretty quickly after the release. So
I feel like a few years ago, independent wrestling had kind of taken a dive towards down a little bit. People weren't into the product as much. I know some of the shows I went to weren't as packed. But now I think after COVID, everything is starting to shoot dramatically, and especially the world of wrestling all around, especially with the way AEW is going. WWE's kind of rebooting some things. Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling now has doing a lot of cross promotion. What are your overall feelings as far as the product as a whole?
Oh man, I love it right now. From a business standpoint, of course, for myself and like all my friends, it's awesome to see so many of my friends and stuff thriving, and just the opportunity for so many people to thrive in the wrestling world. And it used to be, even when the indies were doing all right before AEW came along and stuff like that, really WWE had a strong hold on the entire industry. So it was hard to really thrive unless you went there. And even from what I've heard anyway, their pay rate and stuff was lower because it could be, they could afford to pay you less because the hell else you gonna do, so yeah, wrestling now is just booming, and I love to see it. I mean, I'm all over the place. Like these next couple of months, it's like every date's booked pretty much. It's crazy. I'm flying one city to the next constantly, doing about 4 flights per week. And I couldn't be doing that without the just craze of wrestling in general right now. Indie companies are just selling out left and right. All the GCW shows for however long have been selling out. I don't even know the last one that didn't sell out. It's just crazy right now. You love to see it. It's awesome.
So how is it in the ROH locker room? We've had several guests lately that are from ROH, and they talk about the camaraderie and everything that's there. How was that going back there?
Oh, it's such an awesome place, walking in and knowing the position that I'm put in and the opportunity that I'm being given, and just kind of, especially to a lot of the guys there, just almost walking in fresh, and they're like, who's this freaking guy coming in and, getting such an opportunity is what I thought. That's kind of like what I expected, but there was none of that. Everyone was just awesome and ready to work and ready to just do their best, and helped me out so much. Like everyone there helped me out a lot, and it really makes me look forward to just going back there, and just everyone's just so, there's what's best for the show, and and what's best for the match and what's best for the, and just downward. It's like, what's best for the show, what's best for the match, what's best for the spot, what's best for the entrance. It doesn't matter. Like, everyone's just working to achieve the best out of each individual sector that they're involved with. And
I feel like ROH doesn't always get the notoriety that a lot of the other businesses do, and they have such phenomenal talent there. So I would assume that the locker room is probably like, oh, Alex Zayne's coming. This is good for us. So
it seemed that way. A lot of the guys were just seemed really excited to see me, excited to work with me and stuff, hoping to get, singles matches down the line, mentioning things like that in the back. And that wasn't really what I expected. I expected, like I said, more of the like, oh, screw this guy, like, whatever. So shout out to everyone back there. So many people were just, I don't know, just so hospitable, right? So it was awesome.
Not to be a Debbie Downer, but
you
were recently recently released by WWE and NXT, and I thought the work that I was able to watch you, as far as on television with 205 Live, and of course your match with Kushida and things like that, you were doing exceptional work.
Thank you.
I know WWE was kind of a dream of yours as far as a destination. Everybody wants to make it to WWE at least once. Let's 100% be honest with you. How was your overall experience, if you were to have it summed up a little bit, with WWE?
I really, really enjoyed my time there. A ton of my friends work there still and were hired with me, some of who were released and stuff like that. So that played a big role in it, of course, just getting to go to work with like people who I'm just cool with every day. All the coaches were incredible. The producers were incredible. Like, the medical staff was super nice. Like, I never had any problems with like anyone there. I definitely don't think there was any sort of like specific problem with me that got me released or anything like that. Like, just when you look, you can kind of see the writing on the wall in hindsight, when you look back and you're like, oh no, it makes sense. Once they started kind of restructuring some things and figuring some things out on their end. So really my entire experience there was incredibly positive. Had a blast when I was there, learned a ton when I was there. Like, it was like getting a paid like year at Harvard of wrestling. It was like, how could I ever be like, oh, how dare them? Like, it was amazing. So I also just really enjoyed like their process and their style, and getting to like peek behind that and understand it, which helped me tremendously just become a better performer overall. And yeah, just no hard feelings there at all. Like I told them on the phone when they called me in the first place, they're like, hey, we got some bad news, blah blah blah. And I was like, hey, thanks for everything, great opportunity, had a great time, that sort of thing. And then they expressed, of course, whether it just be to be nice or whatever, and they were like, oh, this isn't the end of the road or whatever, which maybe it is for me. Maybe interested in going back. Like, anything that I do ever is really based on the position I'm in at that time. Like, I'm not going to make a decision today about the next year, 2 years necessarily. I might have goals and things like that, but they're usually more vague than the specifics of a company or something like that, and more besides the negative connotation to the word, more self-centered, I guess.
Right.
And more surrounding the Alex Zayne sort of brand. And that's exactly what I've kind of come back into the indies with the mindset of, is I could start reaching out and putting as many irons in the fire as I could to get signed this place, that place, wherever, and try to do that. But I think it's going to benefit me in the long run, and most importantly, benefit whatever product I eventually sign to or become a part of, like long term. It's going to benefit everyone involved if I first focus on my branding and my value that I'm going to eventually bring to the table. So that's really my focus right now. I know that's but yeah.
I think, for myself and Tom and a lot of wrestling fans, we were very irate, as a lot of talent was released, we're just like, what, how do you, mess up and not, push these people? But I think after last night, we kind of saw with the launch of NXT 2.0 exactly what they were trying to do and try to accomplish. So there was this little bit more of understanding on what they're doing. It still doesn't make it right, though, gosh darn it. They shouldn't release great talent like yourself.
I mean, fortunately for us, and I can't say that they did it with this in mind because I can't speak for them, but fortunately for us as performers, there's so much more opportunity out here. It's not like it's not like a catch and release, but they lay us on dry land. They put us right back into plentiful waters with a lot of opportunities and plenty to eat, so unfortunately for some of the people released, they some of the people released came from other sports and stuff, and I mainly have felt like empathy for that, and going back, like getting released from WWE, and yeah, you've received this training and stuff like that, but you're not connected, you don't have independent experience. It's entirely different world with entirely different expectations, and a lot of people talk these like nightmares about and these horror stories about WWE sort of politicking and stuff, which I'm sure to some extent that that plays a role in everyone's career. But when you're talking about independence, there's just as much. It's just different waters. You're still just navigating waters, but they're just different. It's so yeah, I feel most empathetic for those guys, and I've reached out to and told them that I would help them in any way that I could if independent wrestling was something that they wanted to do. But it's a harsh reality. Like if you're used to that WWE lifestyle and then you come out here and into the wild, it's different. It's much different. So
now you talked about NXT being like the Harvard of professional wrestling. So what are some things that you noticed and were able to take away that and you're a guy with a whole lot of experience elsewhere, but what are some WWE type things that, was like a light bulb going off that like, oh, I can take this with me and use this later?
Right. Well, there's a lot of stuff production wise, of course, when you're thinking like things you wouldn't think about, especially on the indies, which is primarily where I worked. And even when I did work things like New Japan and Ring of Honor and stuff, there's not as much specific direction because you're not as heavily produced, and you're not even that incredibly produced in WWE to where I know a lot of people are like, oh, like they're not letting him do this and they're making him do that, and it's really not that way. Like it's less than you expect, I guess. And like for example, I saw a lot of people commenting on my matches and talking just amongst themselves on various pages. Oh, they're not letting him do the crunch wrap, which is the shooting star double knees, a patent move of mine. But that wasn't even the case, actually. It was, to me, a thing that I wanted to save. If you go back and look at my matches, I really only ever hit one move off of the top rope because I wanted to slowly build story-wise to, if Alex Zayne, Ari Sterling at the time, gets to the top rope, it's over. Like, so I was saving top rope shenanigans, really. And that's even my dive was off the middle rope, and I did a lot more stuff off the middle rope and stuff. So I did throw a couple things off the top rope when I felt it was time for it, missing the shooting star double knees a couple of times, and mainly against major opponents, Kushida, Cameron Grimes, things like that. Like, oh, I'm going for the kill, and it's not there for me. So yeah, it's a little less produced, but I mean, than people expect, but it's still very produced in a sense of like, here's these cameras, and in that case, there's something like 9 cameras, right? And you have a referee that's giving you and feeding you cues and stuff like that. So things like that really helped. And even when you got away from actually being told by the ref, who was being told by the truck through the earpiece and yada yada, you would just have that in your head already. So that's something that I get to take with me out of WWE, as well as just timing of things and sort of how to improve, like learning how to improve yourself really helped a lot. um, it's weird. You kind of get these coaches in your head once you're around them so often. Like I can almost just like hear them if I'm working on something, so that helps a lot. You get these sort of like mentalities to rub off on you. So it's great.
Everyone we have on the show has an influence who kind of helped them get into pro wrestling, but you're kind of like the rare case. And I mentioned this to you in a message in my book, Independent Road to Wrestler's Journey. Facade was someone who mentioned you and your backyard wrestling as kind of helping him kind of get started and actually going through his little backyard stage as well. So take us back to those backyard days. Did you ever think backyard Alex Zayne would be where he's at right now?
Part of me, like that realistic, like the realist in me would say no, but every other fiber of my being would be like, absolutely. Because that's what I was, it just makes sense because it was the only thing I ever really focused on. Aside from the couple of hiatuses I took in my life, it was like, since wrestling was introduced in my life, like even if you were asked, just ask my parents, it's like, oh yeah, like that was just always what was going to happen. Like I never cared about school. I never cared about really anything else. I never cared about a different sport. I never cared about anything. And wrestling, it was just all wrestling all the time. So really, anytime I took a hiatus, it was kind of like, well, what are you doing now? Like, what else you got? So yeah, in a way, yeah. But then when I started getting into the independent scene early, like I think my debut in professional wrestling was 2005. So when I was getting into professional wrestling and it was just not as fun, it wasn't the same as doing the backyard thing. I would still go do backyard with my friends. And then slowly I was like, oh, screw the indies because I can't get anywhere in them because it was a different time. I couldn't reach the same amount of people as I can now. I couldn't reach the companies, it was like mail a VHS tape or DVD out to someone that you put together, which wasn't an easy process, wasn't a cheap process, so yeah, I expected to get here, I guess, in ways, but totally not the way it ended up. Like the every single moment has come as a shock to me, rather. And it's been amazing ride. Like every phone call that I've received, an opportunity I received, I'm just like, I'm still in a whirlwind. It's been 2 years. I'm just still spinning.
Now, one opportunity that's coming up, October 17th, I believe it is, it's you one-on-one with Will Ospreay. And I'm going to tell you now, I am ready to see that matchup. How did that one come about? And what's your plans for Will?
Oh, man. So, of course, actually, New Japan was one of the first calls that I made after getting released. And just I was like, hey, budget cuts. WWE can't afford me according to themselves. So I said, I'm here if you need me, whatever. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll let you know. We got some dates coming up, whatever. And then at that point, I was just texting one of the bookers over there, Rocky over there, and it was like, of course, figuring out the dates that I was available now because dates started flying in so quickly. And I was trying to keep as much open for them without shooting myself in the foot and losing dates, whatever. So we finally landed on some dates. And I was like, yeah, like I'm down to do, whatever. And he was like, I'd like to do you versus Ospreay if we can. And I was like, holy shit. Like my first thought was like, time to just step the game up, train hard and be ready. So as far as what I have for Will Ospreay is that, I've been training extremely hard since my release. I got to test a lot of that this weekend. I got to test that at Ring of Honor, which is no easy feat. So I feel very, very ready and very confident in that match and in that show in general. Both of those shows, day 1 and 2. I'm not even sure what match I have for day 1 right now, but either way, like day 2 alone is going to be crazy, especially it being in the famed ECW arena, right? So that's amazing. What a time.
So I've got to talk about it a little bit while you're on here. So we talked a little bit off air about these action figures behind you. So are they your childhood collection or some that you've picked up after?
These are all well after childhood. My childhood collection was even bleeding into well after childhood. And then eventually, through happenstance, I had broken up with a girl who I was with, and then I left my collection there in the storage because I went and stayed with my cousin while I got my stuff together. And I was like, hey, I'll come back and get my stuff when I have a place or whatever. And in that time, she got evicted. And there goes my childhood collection. So I do not have anything from my childhood collection. So brutal history there. But yeah, I have this entire wall, which obviously things are missing. These are things that I've taken down or that are just missing. But then I have all of those crates there and they're still full. I got mainly BCAs is what I collect, but I collect all sorts of 90s stuff. I'm big into the ECW figures as well and the WCWs, but I don't have as many of those yet. And then I have a few Japanese figures and stuff like that and some newer stuff, of course.
I love it.
I got a ton.
Now, I have recently become a more loose collector. I found that I don't have enough room anymore. So it was a very tough thing, but I tell you, once I started, I get to appreciate the action figures a lot more, seeing them sell, and it's the best decision I've ever made collecting.
So BCA wise, because BCAs were my childhood, right? That was my time. And I want, my goal, which is not the smartest goal, is to collect all the BCAs, mock and loose. So one of each.
I love it.
This room, of course, wouldn't hold it. This house damn near wouldn't hold it. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if I reroute down the line and say, we're just going loose. But I have a lot of loose figures as well. I don't even know where that box is at, somewhere. But yeah, a lot of loose ones. But I haven't been as specific on what I'm grabbing loose. I'll grab small lots when I can, when I see a good deal, things like that, because at the end of the day, they're going to be easier to round up in the end after I get all these mocks handled. So, and these prices are just going up, as you know. The value on these things is just upticking, and I see it being 4 times that in 10 years. So yes. I'm in a rush because there's something like 1,100 figures or more. It's crazy.
Well, hopefully we can get an Alex Zayne micro brawler soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
I need that.
Hopefully. I'm working on something. I'll tweet it out here soon. I can't say too much because I don't want to be like, oh, here's this, and then it's 3 months until the release instead of 3 weeks or something. So I'm waiting on nailing some specifics down date wise, but yeah, we're working on something in that realm. So
awesome.
Now, excited. What is your favorite figure that you own?
My favorite figure that I own, I actually own 3 of the Hayabusa figures. Hayabusa is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. And I own 3 of those. I want to collect every Hayabusa figure ever, right? And I own 3 of those. They're actually in the other room, or I would show them to you now. They're also mock, one of which I actually bought in Japan, 2 of which I ordered from Japan via eBay or whatever, but one I bought on my tour in Japan. So that one, of course, has a specific place in the heart, right?
Yeah.
I got to work in the venue. I can't remember which venue it is. I'd have to reach out and ask because, of course, it has a Japanese name and I am uncultured swine. But it was a venue and it had posters and stuff in the back where Hayabusa had worked. And of course, Hayabusa worked at Kurikan Hall and stuff like that. So it was just cool to work at a bunch of venues. And this venue specifically was outside of Tokyo, and it was a smaller venue. And I was just this is cool. Hayabusa was here, not to mention a million other names, but yeah.
I think it's crazy because I really feel like the wrestling figure industry is now taking off with all the professional wrestlers trying to go back and get in their childhood. So it kind of Matt Cardona and Brian Myers do a great job as far as going back and forth and showing you what they've got. There's a toy store around where we're at now who's got a fantastic collection of Hasbro and old LJNs, which are my two favorites because that's my childhood.
Yeah, I love those as well. I have several Hasbro's and LJNs. They get really pricey, especially if you go mock. But yeah, those I would like loose as long as they're not too beat up because they're just so cool. They have so much just charm to them. So definitely a collection I want to get loose. Mainly the Hasbro's, I think, are the way that I would go. They're such a cool display too. They display so well. But.
See, I can't. I've told myself I'm not going to go after the Hasbro's because they're so pricey.
Right.
However, I have just about all of the retros. So, and they're bringing retros back.
Very cool.
I'm hoping that maybe they will kind of redo some of the ones that maybe I missed because there's probably 6 or 8 of them I don't have. And they're like $100, $200 figures now. And I can't do that.
Right. Yeah. That's steep. I mean, you can, but then you just, you spent 5 figures worth of money on one figure, It does make it tough. That's why when I first got into BCAs, which I kept track of like every price point that I spent on everything. So I can say, oh, this is how much I have in my collection versus how much my collection's worth based on whatever value system. But I have a lot of these behind me that I only spent $3 or $4 on, and that's after shipping and everything because I include all of that in the overall price. So yeah, now you don't get that lucky for sure, but yeah.
Yeah, Tom gets away with it a little bit more. His wife's a little bit more lenient on that spending. My wife wouldn't. She wouldn't tell me no.
Right.
But I also know if I was ever say something like, "You don't need that purse."
Oh yeah.
It would come back as really.
You don't need that.
You didn't
wrestling.
need that. So we just. Yeah.
I learned long ago if they want something, you give it to them.
Yeah.
For sure. When it's your turn, they can't say nothing.
That's right. That's actually a collection that I wouldn't mind getting into is the replica belts. I'm a big fan of those.
Yeah, I have 2 that I don't have hanging up in here, and then I also have 2 in the living room, which a lot of people think my wife's nuts for letting me have 2 in the living room. But
that's where my Hayabusa figures are. So yeah, I understand. I actually have an entire collection too of lucha masks, but they're not like authentic lucha masks. That's something I will dabble in too in the future, but that stuff gets pretty pricey.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. But they're replicas.
Well, Alex, before we let you go, here's your chance to plug everyone where you're at, whether PWTs or wherever, to buy your merchandise, and tell everyone where they can find you at next.
You can find me on all the social medias and things under Alex Zayne. Currently, I actually just tweeted it before we went live about my current handles on Instagram and Twitter being at Ari Sterling WWE. They are being changed. That's all on the back. Sterling, and it was like, I'm trying, but they're trying on the back end to change that. WWE works on the back end with Twitter and Instagram to change that so that you can keep your previous handle and it doesn't disappear or get taken or whatever. So it's been a headache for 35 days or whatever it's been now. But yeah, you can find me still as Alex Zayne on there. So just search Alex Zayne, Google Alex Zayne, go to alexzayne.com. That's where all my links are. That's where my store will be. My store is not, it's open, but it doesn't have any inventory right now. All my inventory is laying next to me on the bed in the guest bedroom, which is also the man cave, which is also just action figures. AlexZayne.com, Alex Zayne everywhere. The store will be up very shortly. The schedule's very busy. I will be making my GCW return this weekend, this Friday in Los Angeles at the Ukrainian Culture Center against Jordan Oliver. You can also watch that on Fight TV. You can find me on Peacock, Hulu, or WWE Network under Ari Sterling. You can find me on IWTV or Fight TV or Honor Club or whatever else as Alex Zayne, as well as New Japan's network. I'm not hard to find. Yeah, just look up that name.
He's everywhere. That's what I told people. Start the
That's
show.
the
If you don't
goal.
know who this guy is, I mean, why are you even
That
watching
is
our
the
show?
goal.
So.
Right. Well, hopefully there is a crossover of both my people finding out who you are and your people finding out who I am.
That's
great. And they will all like tacos about it.
That's right. For everyone else out there, make sure you all are doing what you need to do. Stay safe so you can go watch Alex wrestle at his live shows wherever he's at. We need pro wrestling to continue the way it's going right now and trending upward as well. The plan is to be back this week. We've got 2 more big shows this week. Of course,
Nice.
It's the wrestling business. Things happen. But
who else you got coming on? Who else is coming on?
We ain't dropping. We ain't dropping names. We're not dropping names until
you gotta tune in. You gotta tune in. I love it.
I make sure y'all head up our PWT shop as well. Pick up some merchandise and pick up my book, Independent Road to Wrestler's Journey, over at Barnes & Nobles. Greatly appreciate it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. It's not that hard, people. Subscribe.
Is that in the physical brick and mortar stores, or is that only on the Barnes & Noble website?
It is available in Barnes & Noble stores. I have seen it there.
Very cool.
But they don't order a lot to start off with, so once they sell one, it may not. So I always just tell people go to barnesandnobles.com, and it's a fantastic.
Awesome. I'm gonna look for it. That's awesome. That's super cool.
I mean, you're in the book. You didn't even know you're in the book, but you're mentioning.
I had no idea. Yeah, you mentioned that to me, and I was like, "What?" Yeah, so I got to get that. Yeah,
absolutely.
I have every magazine I've ever been mentioned in Japan, in Europe, and America, everywhere that I could find any. So that's definitely something else that I collect. So I'll be out there hunting for it, and so should you.
That's right. Alex, man, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I greatly appreciate it. For everyone out there, again, remember, stay safe, support all the talent out there, and we'll see y'all later in the week.